Welcome everybody to MiMentor Coaches Coffee Club. I'm delighted to have our special guest here, Jack Cassidy, who'll be joining us tonight to talk everything about his experiences, and where he's been, what he's been up to, why he got into coaching, and how this podcast can sort of help those coaches out there that have any burning questions. But yeah, thanks Jack very much for agreeing to do this.
No, thanks for having me, James. Yeah, and I much appreciate it.
And first and foremost, I guess, how are you, mate?
Yeah, all good. It's I've not long been back in the country, which I'm sure we'll come to talk about. So it's been a busy few weeks, but yeah, no, pleasure to sit down with you and talk football.
So I think one of the first questions before we get stuck into your experiences and where you've been, which is vast, and it will add such a good discussion point around this conversation today, and good for the coaches out there to hear. What sort of inspired you to get into coaching, I guess? What was it that made coaching sort of become your sort of journey?
I think it was being inspired by some of the coaches that I had myself. I mean, I only played youth football, was just grassroots football for me, but it was actually my friend's dad who run our local team, but he just did everything so professionally. All the training sessions were always set out. Whenever you turn up, the session would always be set out for you, and the kits and little things like that were maybe not the norm in grassroots football, and that sort of sparked my interest into coaching, really. And then it was through him that his son, who was my friend at the time, we both did our level 1, and within that same grassroots club started sort of coaching the under 14s while we were playing for the under 18s, and then it just sort of snowballed from there, really.
And I guess those sort of experiences that you had, seeing that and inspiring you to get into coaching, is that one of the most important things to you in terms of the preparation and having it all set out for the players? I know not necessarily in the pro game, but as you first started, was that always a trait that you sort of looked to sort of copy, if you like?
No, absolutely, yeah. It's something that I think being organised goes a long way. I think players just want you to know that you care about them, and I appreciate that it's not always as easy. You might be training on an evening where there's a group on there before you, so you can't set up an hour before. So it's all relative. But I just think there's small things. If you've got a well thought out session with the players in mind, if you're prepared, if you can set the session up early, I think these small sort of organisational things can go a long way, and that's something that definitely I took from my grassroots coach, and sort of that stayed with me now.
Yeah, and like you said, that is one of the challenges, isn't it? Sort of coming on at probably normally on the hour with a group of 20 quid rating to get started. But before we go any more into that, I think what would be great to do is understand a bit more about your experiences and your journey as a coach. Maybe even a little bit about your non-league days as well as a player.
Yeah, so I pretty much started coaching really early. So I started coaching when I was sort of 17, 18, again in that same grassroots club as I was playing for. I was in sixth form at the time. And then I left sixth form and decided not to go down the university route, and I worked in a pupil referral unit in Luton. So it was like you'd call it like a youth sports coach. So you sort of combined a little bit of education and a little bit of football coaching or sports coaching in general with students that were expelled from school in Luton. So that was tough. That threw me into the world of, working with some really difficult students with behaviour problems, and to win them around and sort of try and give them a platform to achieve success through sport. That was sort of the provision there. And then I was all coaching part-time, playing local level, really. At the time it was like step 7 of non-league, which is just local level, if I'm being honest with you. So my playing career is nothing to write home about. And then I sort of was doing my some of my teaching qualifications as well, my post-16 teaching qualifications, then went and worked at Histon which had like a really successful non-league college program, which was run by someone called Brian Page. So we had a really excellent provision where one year they got to the FA Youth Cup fourth round, I think it was, against Liverpool. So really, it was before there was many of these college provisions. And then I was sort of at a crossroads, because Brian then got the first team job and asked me to sort of help, albeit it was sort of more in an observation role. And I was still playing at this point. I was sort of playing step 6, but deep down I knew that was probably my limit. And then that's when I fully decided to. Histon were in the Conference North at the time, which was step 2. I was playing step 6, and I had the opportunity to go and observe and be a fly on the wall. So that's when I sort of made that commitment to coaching. I sort of made my way through sort of the non-league ladder, whilst teaching and working on education programs. And I'm sort of fast forwarding 10 years here to not bore everyone. And then spent some time at Luton's academy, then went abroad to Sweden, then the UAE, and then now I'm back working now for Cambridge United with the under-21s.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, you say fast forward 10 years, and I appreciate why you've done that, but I bet there's a hell of a lot of learning that occurred in that sort of area, in that scenario, that you that sort of shaped you, as much as we talked about the inspiration that you got at an early age. But just talking about the Luton bits that you're doing, I mean, it's always about being at the coal faces and getting those hours and getting those experiences. I guess, how did they shape you? Did they potentially put you off a little bit? I mean, what was the bits that you take away from them experiences the most?
So my background was, the school I went to was in a village. It wasn't really that diverse. And that was really that was where I was from. So then to go from that at 17, 18 to then go into Luton, and not only that, the area in which I was working in Luton was really diverse, and Luton is diverse as a town anyway. And to then work with kids with such challenging behaviour at such a young age grew me up like you wouldn't believe. And it not only that, it just allowed me to appreciate people of different backgrounds and deal with people. I hadn't been to school with students like that, really, in terms of deprived areas, in terms of the diverse areas, in terms of the different faiths that were in the town at the time. Really, like I said, I hadn't been exposed to that, so it grew me up, and it just got me to understand the importance of how much trust some of these students didn't have for the educational system, and for almost authority in general, and for you to then build up that level of trust with them over such a long period of time, to then allow them to get them to do some of the things that you were asking. That was very, very rewarding. I think that was probably the foundation, really, for me, because I think I was very sheltered before that. I just think I was naturally, through no fault of anyone, it was just, like I say, it was just where I went to school never exposed me to those sorts of experiences. So to get it so early on in my first ever full-time employment post-school was key.
Yeah, that's definitely sort of an experience. I can quite imagine that's being thrown at the deep end for sure. Do you think, part of that experience itself was one of the reasons, or some of the rationale, before sort of making the move to abroad and Europe in your first instance before UEA?
Yes, yeah, 100%. I think my mindset since working abroad, and even coming back to this country, I just think I'll return a different person. I think that's maybe a little bit too strong, but just with a more well-rounded view of the world. I think you can be very quick to judge people, very quick to judge certain situations. I think there's certain propaganda with the way certain countries are portrayed in the media. The World Cup was a really good example. I was at the World Cup, one of the best events I've ever been to in Qatar. But yet, only really the negative stuff is fed through some media streams. So just my general view of the world and how I perceive things now is so much different, having gone abroad. I'm really, really grateful for those experiences, really, because I think it's helped shape some of my character, or it's helped develop some certain characteristics, which I think can make me not only a better coach, but a better person going forward as well.
Definitely. That's brilliant. I guess, how does it, from a coaching perspective, how did it differ between, Sweden, the UK, and also UEA, in terms of how does that differ in terms of coaching? What does it look like? What did when you arrived, was it a massive shock, or were there similarities probably at the levels you were going in at?
I think the football often reflects the society in the country. So, for example, I found that in the UAE, it was quite a dictatorial leadership style, quite an authoritative leadership style. Not necessarily in a negative way. It's just that sort of that would be sort of the go-to way of leading. Whereas, say, Sweden was a lot more flatline in that way of leadership in terms of the Scandinavia. So those were big differences. And language was far easier in Sweden, because, to be honest, I don't remember coming across anyone that didn't speak English, actually. So I was lucky. And to be perfectly honest, actually, in the UAE, you didn't need to speak Arabic, because English is pretty much their second language there. But it wouldn't have been as strong in Sweden. So you'd just have to make sure you're really clear in the way that you're delivering, and the type of words and terminology that you may be using. But yeah, there was certainly different styles in the way that things were done. But equally, it was good to see two different ways of doing things, and you take little bits from each environment, really.
And then, in terms of, I guess you mentioned leadership styles, and where would you align most to in terms of your style when you're working with players in a coaching session or as a manager?
I think I'm when I coach, I am quite authoritative with how I deliver, and how so how I deliver my practices, how I want certain things to be done, but not in a way that sort of overpowers the players. It's just sort of I'm just got quite a loud voice, I think, and I'm quite energetic with the way that I deliver, and that's just sort of my personality, really. But it's more around, for me, it's more around the relationships off the pitch with the players as well that really makes a difference. I'm somebody who likes to listen to the players. I'm not somebody that will jump to any conclusions about things. I'm always involving them in discussions about their future. About if we just take my current role for example, it's always a discussion with the player to get their thoughts, give them my thoughts, and come up with a solution with whatever it is we're discussing about the way forward. So I suppose I've taken a mix, really, but I think not even just modern day. I just think you can go back years and years and years. I think the crux of it comes down to how the coach, or how the leader, if we're talking about any other organisation, builds the relationship with the people that he's leading. And I think it's those strengths of those relationships that really make the difference.
Agree more. I think, that relationship piece, and I suspect that across your whole journey and why you've been so successful, is because you do spend the time sort of getting to have that, build that trust, build that relationship. It's probably stemmed a lot from when you did it back in Luton all those years ago. And before we get on to the current role, I guess, given your background with Luton and his ties to that sort of area, how great an achievement is that they've reached the Premier League? And when you look back, could you have seen that being the potential of it?
Yeah, I mean, I was in the academy for a couple of years, and only on a part-time basis initially. So that was just to see the way that they've gone from strength to strength and jumped to the Premier League is unbelievable, really. And there's some really good people. I've got a really close friends there that are still within the football club and sort of leading the academy. And yeah, everyone's done a superb job. But it's a really well run club since it got sort of taken over and re-brought back up from the non-league. It's been run sustainable, and I think they've probably shown a few other clubs a blueprint in terms of the way to do certain things. But yeah, they've always produced good players. They've always had sort of good members of staff, and I think it's going to be exciting to see them in the Premier League.
Yeah, 100%. I know we've so I guess where you've travelled around different things, what are some of the a best advice you'd give someone going into, what does day one look like? What advice would you give someone that's perhaps considering going to an abroad to coach abroad or even to a different club? What are some, because obviously you do move around when you're going through your coaching journey, and as you should, because I say you build your experiences. Is there any advice that you could give someone that's going in day one, or tips that you kind of do?
I think the biggest thing is to listen and observe, and it's probably something I've had to get better at. I made some mistakes early on when I went to the UAE, thinking I could just take a blueprint that's worked in an English academy. So I'd previously been at Luton. There's the standards that Luton set really high standards for their academy players. I really like some of the bits they did. Well, I'm going to try and take some of those things that I've learned there and make those types of rules and standards in the UAE. And to be honest, I nearly lost a lot of players very early on because what I didn't understand was the culture. So I should have waited. I should have listened. I should have observed, how do things work here? What can I change? What can I change in the short term? What are my quick wins? And almost strategically planned out maybe a 30, 60 and 90-day plan a little bit better. But I wanted to try and change the world within 10, 11 days, probably because of that. Maybe I think ego is probably not the right word. It's probably maybe even also the insecurity. I've got to show what I know early doors. So I'm going to put my stamp on it. And it was just, yeah, I in the second season, I got that a lot better. But then I'd been there a year, and I needed to make sure that I didn't make that mistake when I went to a new environment, and that, of course, you want to put your own stamp and your own mold on things. But most importantly, you need to learn and see what's been going on before. And then you have a much better, well-rounded view before you can go in and then start making the necessary changes. Because sometimes some things don't need changing anyway. That's all depending on the observations that you make.
Yeah, and I think that, having that level of understanding that sometimes, if it's not broke, sort of don't need to always fix it, and almost complement that as you go with your own coaching experiences and that. And it's probably over eagerness. I'd probably put that down to maybe.
Yeah, it's probably the right way
of it. And I guess from the different experiences you've had abroad and the UK, would that be one of the biggest learnings, or what would be one of the biggest learnings for you as a coach?
Yes, I think the ability to listen and observe would be one. And then also, I think from all of my coaching experiences, really, even going back to non-league football, when you sometimes only had a Tuesday or a Thursday to prepare a team for a Saturday. And ultimately, I think your job I think coaching is about getting the best out the players that you've got. I think it is as simple as that. Whether it be whatever level, grassroots, if you're in the development game in terms of you're trying to develop those players and make them into first team players, or if you're a first team manager, your job is to get the best out of those individuals. And to do that, I think you need real clarity in what you're delivering. and clarity in what those individuals or the team need to do to be successful. And then I think it needs to be simple for the players. And I think some of those experiences of working in non-league and having limited time with the players before a game day, working in a foreign country where English is not their first language and you can't just do a team talk at the front of the room for 10, 15 minutes and expect them to understand, that I've started to refine. And whenever I'm designing sessions, designing practices, or designing a video session, is it clear? Has it got clarity? And is it simple? Will they understand it? And I think they're some of the biggest learnings that I've taken away, really.
Now, I guess with limited time, and for those coaches here, is there any advice you'd give those coaches that might only have an hour on a Thursday night, if they're a youth coach, or like you said, even in the non-league game where you might have travelled on a Tuesday and you got a Thursday night session? What would your advice be for those types of coaches as well?
I think sometimes naturally, again, going back to how you described it in terms of that eagerness, we almost try to do too much. So if we know that we've got limited time, then narrow your focus a little bit. So let's say you want to improve your players individually. Well, don't have 10 things that they're good at and 10 things that they could be better at, because it's very difficult. It may be at the top of your session plan, you've got the players' names and you've got 2 things that they excel at and 2 areas of development. So every time you're planning your session, you're just bearing that in mind, because you might be pairing this player with that player because one's got 1v1 attacking, one's got 1v1 defending, as an example. And if that's the case, each week, just focus, even you planned your session, and then you might just focus on 2 different players each week, because you can't focus on your whole squad of 16 in grassroots football. This is if we're talking in that side. And if you're talking team football, again, in my experiences in non-league, we just made the game really, really simple. We sort of narrowed the focus and go, right, these are the 6 areas that we want to be really good at as a team. And then we only really done training sessions around those 6 things. Maybe rotated them every, and to be honest, our sessions did look similar. The same messages through different types of practices. But that's what we did to get the best out of that team, because that was sort of more results based. So it just don't try and do too much. You're better off doing less, but doing it well.
Yeah, brilliant. That's brilliant advice for those, particularly like the new coaches as well. And I guess we've done some bits, and obviously I know God as very well, and he sends his regards. When you're doing individual development plans and stuff like that, I mean, how do you bring that out in a session where you've already got 15 or 16 players there on a Thursday night? It might be senior players, it might be the first group of players that are starting out on their journey in playing. What would be your advice to sort of stretch those that need to, and also sort of almost don't despond those that are looking to enjoy the game more than probably develop into the next superstar as such?
It's for me, the players won't ever need to know how you're, so they wouldn't know this anyway. And it can just be, for me, it's really, really subtle, simple things that you could do. It may be as simple as, tonight you're doing a small-sided game and the theme is playing forward. And in this small-sided game, it's playing forward. But when you're picking your teams, that is linking to their individual development plans. Because if you know that one of your centre-backs needs to work on defending the space in behind, well, then put your quickest striker up against him then. You make the pitch a little bit longer, that end. So there's more space. So he's got that space to defend. So just by who you're pairing on what team can help with that. So it's stuff that the players wouldn't even know. So I think that's quite a simple way that you can, with your planning, and that's why I like to have some of their key things at the top of my session plan, because it just reminds me I haven't got to refer to a separate document. So as I'm picking my teams, okay, well, this player needs work on his link up play, but this player needs some work on defending strikers, defending forwards with their back to them. Okay, well, I'm going to pair them. I just think simple tweaks like that can actually then, when you're then watching the game, you can then start to watch out for these things, and you might be feeding back on a drinks break or during the session on the individual stuff as well as the team stuff.
Yeah.
So just small, subtle things.
I think you've obviously touched on people that were sort of important a little bit on your journey, like Brian at Histon. How much of a importance are these role models to you? And in terms of, mentoring, and do you have a mentor that you can call upon to ask questions, or is it more about a network of people that you can just, speak to, and how important is that to you?
I'd say more of a network I have of people that I trust and I speak to. Some have had a significant impact on my journey that I may not speak to as much now. Yeah. I've had so many different people that have had a different influence on me at different times for different reasons, really, whether it be my first boss who gave me the opportunity to go to the pupil referral unit in Luton, whether it be Brian, who I mentioned. I got my first opportunity in non-league with a manager called Ricky, who really supported me. And I learned a lot about leadership and managing players at that point, which I had no experience in. I was a young coach. I was 24 years old, coaching players that were older than me. It was daunting, but he filled me with confidence, and I was just watching the way that he sort of managed the group. And then over time, as I've worked in different academies, you just work with some good people. As the now academy director at Luton, Paul Benson, I work with him closely, and he's somebody that I still regularly speak to. And you meet people along the way. I met James Gow, who was my boss in at Al Jazeera. We met years ago on a coaching license, and he's somebody that I connected well with. And so I sort of just got this network of people and different people that I've met along the way that I've just taken bits from. I feel fortunate, really. And there's people that obviously I would have forgot to mention there that you just come into contact with. And the more, I suppose, the more people you do come into contact with and work with, the more you can grow your network, and the more you can just continue to learn off these people. Because there is, the best learning is, for me, speaking to others, watching others work. Courses are fantastic, but some of the best things that have happened to me on courses are the people that I've met, because I've actually ended up gaining employment through the relationships that I've gained through meeting people on courses.
And then, and I can agree more. And that community piece and networking is invaluable. And as you touched on there, I mean, how important were the licenses to you? It's a bit of a two-part question. So, how important are I guess, the formal licenses, coaching badges that you get, and then outside of that, with the informal professional development content that you look, where do you go for that? And equally, how important is that to you as well?
All of it's really important, really. I think the licenses are important because I've been on some really good courses over the years. I think, like I said, I think some of the most powerful things that happen on courses is then you've got a bunch of football people in a room together talking about football. And when the game can be so busy, it's difficult to do that, especially with people outside of the football club that you may be working for at the time. So just to have discussions going on, and you're discussing this and that, whether it be tactical stuff, whether it be about player development, learning plans, I think that's the most valuable element for the courses. And like I say, then naturally you form relationships that then extend beyond that course. Then I've always been one that's been really keen to continue my learning outside of the normal coaching pathway, if we sort of label it as that. And I've done it through anything and everything, whether it be through video content, webinars, phone calls, going to watch people, the amount of messages I've sent and haven't received replies from people, I don't care. It's just, I think you have to just get yourself out there, and I've got a thirst for learning, and nothing's going to deter me from trying to be the best I can at what I do. And through that, sometimes you get people that get back to you, sometimes you don't, and it's part and part of it. But yeah, any opportunities I've had over the years to watch other coaches work, to speak to other coaches, to watch webinars, then that I've always been one for extending my learning beyond just the traditional courses.
I think you're right. It's often not personal when people don't get back to you, and I think it's important to always consider that, because it does happen. It happens in every walk of life as well. So, no, brilliant. Well, what I'd like to do, actually, before we move on to that, because we haven't even spoken really about your current role and why you're back in the UK. So I guess, could you just give us a little bit about that, how that's going, obviously, and what's your biggest ambition for the current role?
So it's quite a unique role in some respects. So I'm looking after the under 21s, as it would be traditionally known. But how Cambridge do it is they don't play in a traditional under 21s games program. So there's a smaller number of players. They're not a squad as such that play as an under 21s against all the other clubs. They believe in the loans game program. So the players will get their games program through loans. We have a very close working relationship with the first team. So my day looks totally different. I think the best way to describe it, it's almost like I'm an individual development coach for the players in that phase. And my job is to bridge the gap through coaching, mentoring, through managing their loans program, to make sure that at the end of each season that I have got them closer to being prepared for the EFL and for senior football. And that job is the reason I came back, because I think the football club is full of good coaches. They've had a really good FA Youth Cup run last season under Jimmy, and the first team staff, I've heard really good things about them and the way that they worked. And I wanted to go into an environment that was going to challenge me. I was going to be around good coaches, around good players, and just the right environment, a learning environment, and an environment which was going to be welcoming. And it's been everything. It's been everything that I thought it would be. So yeah, no, I'm really enjoying it. It's I felt really welcomed. I actually lost track. I feel like all the weeks have merged in, but I'm probably 3-4 weeks in now. And I'm loving the role, really enjoying working with the players and really enjoying working with the staff. I get to, for me, it's an excellent role because I get to be around the first team staff and see how they plan, and the detail that they go into every day and be around their sessions is outstanding. Mark Bonner, Barry Core and Kevin Betsy. And then I get to be around the youth team staff as well. So I'm around so many good coaches. So I was really grateful for Dom, the academy manager, to give me the opportunity. And and I've been really, really, really enjoying it. So yeah, hopefully, I think with the fact that I've had experiences both in the academy, in a PDP abroad, and then in the non-league here, I think that for me, it gives me a nice blend to use my experiences to try and provide the players with that clarity and with that simplicity and honesty, to try and help them bridge that gap from the youth team to the first team. So yeah, no, it's a challenge that I'm really excited about, and like I say, loving every day at the moment.
Yeah, and just from having this conversation alone, although obviously I know bits about your background and that, but your experiences align so well, and you can see it within the way that you talk about it with the passion. So I'm sure you'll be a huge, huge success in addition to their club. If there was any advice you give to a young coach starting out, what would the biggest or the one bit of advice you could give them?
Don't shortcut the hours. I think there's now a culture, because that's the way society's gone. It's quick fix that you can, each year you're just going to go up an age group because you want to get to this level and that level. And there's almost badge collecting, whether that be coaching badges or club badges, when sometimes it's as simple as, what is the nearest grassroots team from your house? Save the travel. Don't worry about the tracksuit. Go to that club and try and coach as much as you can. And you will have to volunteer your time. The amount of hours that I've done things and for free as a young coach whilst getting my coaching badges, sometimes you have to do these things. I just don't think there's any shortcut for gaining those experiences. You know, I still call upon experiences when you've got 60 kids in a sports hall when I'm 17 years old trying to do a soccer camp, for example. You know, I've done supply teaching, which I know it's not directly coaching, but again, it goes back to that thing of how do you get a group of, when you walk in the room, right, they think they're going to be able to mess about for an hour. How do you get those kids on side in literally 1 minute? Yeah. That's helped me with my, so it's just, don't shortcut the fact that you've got to go out there and just accumulate loads of hours in different environments and just learn and learn and learn, but learn by doing. Just learn by going out there and coaching and finding your way.
So on to the quick fire question.
Quick fire, no problem.
So each one is going to be, I'm looking for a very quick answer. Favorite podcast?
Performance, I'd say.
Performance, yeah.
I listen to that.
Any particular favorite episode from that podcast?
I'll tell you which one I did like. The ex-Ryder Cup captain, is it Paul McGinley? Yeah, that was a good episode. Yeah.
Your sporting hero?
Although, do you know what? As a kid, I used to love Peter Schmeichel because I was a goalkeeper. That was the first shirt I ever had. I got brought a Peter Schmeichel shirt, and I don't even support Man United. So I'll say that as a child.
But what is your most memorable moment in sport?
Yeah, I suppose we got promoted with St Ives. That was a really good experience. That's probably one that I really, really enjoyed. I had a really good season there with some good people. So that's probably a personal one.
Best piece of advice?
Yeah, I think just gain experience. Probably I've stolen that advice and just given it out myself when you asked me that question. Just go out there and just gain experience by doing. And try, in the early years, try not to say no to too much. Just try things.
Your favourite meal to cook?
Cook? Wow, I can't cook, by the way. Chicken fajitas.
And then 3 celebrities that you would invite to dinner and why. One has to be a coach.
Roy Hodgson, the coach, somebody that can speak multiple languages, which I can't, by the way, but coached abroad. Still, and I mean this with respect, so like somebody of older age working with such young players, but listening to some of the stuff that sort of Abriche Eze said about him at the end of last year and how he rejuvenated his game. And I think that's an amazing ability to be able to connect with people. But then I'll go Barack Obama.
Wow.
Because he's interesting and unbelievable at public speaking. And now you're testing me, so I could probably pick someone else along those lines. I've said Roy Hodgson, Barack Obama. It's an intelligent table minus me so far, so I need to. I'm trying to think who else I would.
Good lot of experience.
You know who else I find really interesting? Actually, Gary Neville.
Oh wow,
Gary Neville.
Interesting mix.
Quite like some of the stuff he's done with his businesses, and plus some experiences as a player, his mindset. Yeah, I quite like listening to Gary Neville.
Who do you support?
Glasgow Rangers.
Best sort of childhood memory in sport?
We had like a grassroots final at under 18s that was played at Stadium MK when it was quite new, Stadium MK. And for us to go from a grassroots pitch to play there, that was quite nice.
I mean, that's everything I had on my list to sort of ask you tonight. And I just wanted to say a huge, huge thank you for giving up your time. I know you're busy and obviously adapting to a new role and just back in the UK. So no, my mentor, we really huge thanks and appreciate you giving up the time.
Thank you very much. No, much appreciated.